So this is another one that's sort of self-evident, except it's often overlooked, and it's vivid for those of us who are trying to bring people together in a community and find out that there's, not spaces available to bring people together to talk or work together. And very often there isn't the right kind of space. It's like for people who want to do a process called World Cafe, you need access to spaces where there can be lots of little tables with 4 or 5 people around them. People who want to do open space have to have spaces where people can be off on the side somewhere doing little sub conversations here and there. So there's lots, and just being able to have spaces where niches in the community space where people can just stop and talk. Cafes had that, park benches, whatever, having that kind of thing accessible. So why is democracy? Because you're trying to have people engaging together in creative ways. You need space for that. But you also need, online spaces, and people are busily creating online spaces that have capacities for very different kinds of conversation to happen online, and that's still an ongoing, very rapidly developing thing. What kinds of conversation are difficult or hard or easy online, and so people are making new software to and allow forums to be built for people to do different things online together. That whole world is part of creating spaces. Psychological space, again, if you are pushing people into focusing on their own lives or hating each other, you will not have the psychological space for people to be able to work together. So we want space in people's schedules. If people are, if everybody is being overworked, there's no help for mothers. There's no relief for people who are working. There's children are all, scheduled from morning till evening, and there's no real time for people to stop and have conversations that can make a difference, to say nothing of, organized conversations politically, to make some political progress together for the community. So that's another kind of space, is space and time. And cultural space that says, hey, this is important to do. You have a culture that says, it's like the indigenous cultures where they quote unquote talk until there's nothing left but the obvious truth. I mean, a culture that believes that is important makes space for sitting around talking to find that obvious truth and to allow it to unfold over time. That's another form of scheduling space. It's not just here is 2 hours to do it in. It's like sometimes we're going to need to just talk and then carry on and talk some more, even though other things were there in the schedule, because we're still working it out. And so having a culture that says this is really important. The Dalai Lama talks about a culture of dialogue, and I think that's part of it, where we're expecting that this is a big part of the way we relate to each other, and we need to honor that and provide the resources for that. So a wise democratic system would prioritize the provision of all those different kinds of spaces. Different kinds of things. Again, the Sweden's Almaden Week comes up. It's a specific space, time, cultural. It's all of them. Maker spaces, a whole pile of maker spaces. People who are creating shared spaces for doing work, building things, fixing things. Co-housing is a good example. A bunch of intentional communities, but co-housing is an interesting one because it's a mix of your own space combined with common spaces. Online sharing and gifting sites. These are spaces in which we actually, share things and exchange things. The White Dog Cafe in Philadelphia, a number of people focus on. This is a restaurant where it's like you're invited to a dinner where, a couple of homeless people tell their stories, and then you talk about that. And it's a and they also create, get people to go to other restaurants and, places that the United States says you're not supposed to go, like, Vietnam and Cuba and stuff. The Judy Wicks would organize people to go on trips to go to cafes and restaurants in these places that you're not supposed to travel to connect up with people in these other areas. Libraries very often have spaces for people to have meetings. Churches, local groups providing space. We have a aging and community network here that meets in a room free of charge at a mental health center. Very often there are issues of money. Having to pay for a space to meet is problematic for many people. Particularly the more grassroots it is, the more problematic it becomes. So having a hotel at the conference center that you pay $5,000 for a day is not the same as having a space where you can, the school, when the school closes, you can go and use the school rooms, kind of thing. And I just stumbled, when I was writing this, I stumbled on a thing called spacious.com, which is restaurants, fancy restaurants in New York that open for dinner, at 5 o'clock or something. This group called Spacious has an arrangement with the restaurant where people can come and rent a workspace, individual or collective workspace, in the restaurant when the restaurant is closed. And there's a few staff from Spacious who sort of manage it and make sure there's coffee available. And then when the restaurant opens, lots of people who are working in spaces, get their dinners there. So it's a win-win. So it's an interesting, you have spaces that are closed off and you kind of open them up. It's an existing space that is opened up either for profit or by the community decision to open it up for community use.